Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Auscast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Auscast. Simply head to auscastnetwork.com for details.
Do you want to know how to build awareness of your brand and your expertise? Well, starting a podcast is one of the fastest ways. That's why this week on Kari's Couch, my monthly interviews, I'm speaking with Andy Martin, a co-founder of Auscast Network, Australia's coolest podcasting platform, who talks about working at Nova, how to start podcasting, and building awareness through social media. I'm Kari Watt, the creator of the CARIA show and a digital strategist with nearly 2 decades of experience in marketing and communications. It's my mission to help you achieve and exceed your social media marketing goals through a tailored digital strategy to help turn your followers into customers. For the best digital and social media tips and to rank higher on Google search, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new podcast. And you can follow me at Kari Watt on social media for some good vibes. It's free. Andy, welcome to Kari's Couch. You are my very first monthly interview on the CARIA show. Now, my first question for you is, how did you start your career in broadcasting?
It was back in year 12 in 2001, and I remember doing an English project where you had to record your own voice. Yeah. So I got out Mum and Dad's answering machine back then and recorded into that and then delivered my project. And then from there, I sort of had a bit of interest in, I guess, listening to myself is probably the best way to put it. I looked around for, different community sort of groups for, somewhere to learn that sort of thing. And came across the Carclew Arts Centre here in Adelaide. We're running their first ever introduction to radio course. Okay. And they were doing it in conjunction with another community radio station here called Fresh FM. And it was their first ever course as well. So I was part of that for I think it went for about 8 weeks every Wednesday. You did a bit of an introduction to sort of radio, which incorporated how radio works, using your voice, how cool it is to be on the radio, all that sort of stuff. Once we finished the course, we were then asked if we want to be part of the station as a volunteer. It's a community station. They want to get everyone together. And at that point, the radio station wasn't 24 hours a day. We're sharing a license with a radio station called Radio Italiana down here. So Fresh FM was only on air from 4 p.m. till 6 a.m. every day. And because it was electronic music, it was club music, it was probably a good time that was on as well. So became part of Fresh FM and became a volunteer, had no sort of idea of what I wanted to get out of it. All I knew is that I wanted to be around it and to be involved with it. And because the station wasn't on during the day, I was able to go in there, obviously volunteer my services with whatever they needed, but also just play with the gear that was there, from the record players to learn how to DJ to, using the panel to talk and things like that. So I was a volunteer there for about 7 years and then around long enough where I knew that this is what I wanted to do as a career path. So I then started to do anything for money there. So I would press play on a recording for a couple of dollars, and then all of a sudden I became the operations manager there after putting on a few events for them. And I was operations manager for about probably like roughly a year and a half. And while I was doing that, I was also a casual street team person for Mix down here. So, driving around in the cars, handing out ice cold cans of Coke. So I was doing it on the weekends, doing Fresh during the week, and then I got the opportunity to be the general manager of Fresh FM while they searched for a particular person to replace the guy that left that role. That's where I really learnt about becoming a leader. I was 24, 25 at that time, so I was pretty young for that sort of thing. You've got volunteers who think they know everything in the world. And also you're then dealing with, the CBAA, which is like the community broadcasting people, and really heavy amounts of paperwork and sort of rules about community groups and broadcasts and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. So while I was doing that and learning the ropes there, I got offered full-time work at Mix, and then an opportunity came up to then go work at Nova as a casual Casanova. So that's another street team person handing out more Isocola cans of Coke. So I ended up taking the Nova job because I knew that if I lasted long enough, the other radio station that they're part of, 5AA, which was at that time just full of old folk, I could retire there and work until I turned grey upstairs at 5AA. So I began working as a Casanova 3 hours a day for a few days a week, and then sort of grew into doing a lot more around the station because I was there, which led me to then take over, what would you call it? I was an assistant producer for the Fitzy Claren Jules breakfast show back in the day. Everyone would know Fitzy right now.
Yeah, of course.
And then
you had to think about that one though, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was 11 years ago. So did that for a year, and then that show finished up when Fitzy moved to Sydney, and then I decided to put my hand up to do a bit of production. So I was just doing random bits and pieces, melting together some audio for a podcast that they were putting up at the time, and then that then progressed into me just filling the seat for some people that went away, and then all of a sudden I'm full-time announcer / production guy. Yeah. And then while I was doing that, I was then handed the role as well as digital content producer for Adelaide, so that incorporated their website gear and social media. My studio was my Pro Tools machine and all the on-air gear in front of me, and then to my right was another Mac, which was all the digital stuff with all your Adobe Suite and things like that. So I was literally throughout the day switching from desk to desk as I worked to get everything done. While I was doing that, I then decided that at some point in the future, podcasting might become a thing. So we sort of knew about podcasting, but the radio stations just thought it was a place to put up your best of show. There was never really any sort of original content that was getting put up there. So that sort of made my gut sort of go, okay, something might be coming there. And then when I moved out to the country, so Strathalbyn, which is about an hour, 45-minute drive away every morning, I would listen to podcasts because you could never get radio out there. So that also sort of tweaked my interest in podcasting. And then one day I was hosting a fashion parade in Rundle Mall, and a comedian mate of mine walked past, and he's like, man, I miss those fresh days where we all just got to have fun and we're on the air and stuff. And I was like, well, have you ever thought about a podcast? He's like, interesting thought. So I contacted another one of our mates from the fresh days, and then we began a podcast called The Badcast, which was just three mates sitting in my lounge room with an esky full of beers, and we just hit record. We had no idea what we were doing. And luckily, with the fact that we didn't have any idea what we were doing, Big Al, the comedian, was able to fill it with jokes to get us through every episode. And that sort of bloomed into a pretty popular podcast down here.
So how did you start Auscast Network? What was the premise around it?
One of our mates he wanted to know more about podcasting and how he could make a podcast. So we're like, well, this is how we did it. Would you like us to do it for you? And he's like, hell yeah. And so that's pretty much where Auscast was then born. We did it for another couple of podcasters. So we had about 4 podcasts at the time. We're like, oh, we better really sort of figure out what we're doing here. So then, the Auscast Network was born for nearly 5 years ago, I reckon. And then it's been a passion project up until December last year.
So when you say passion project and now you're going into it full time, what's the plan for Auscast Network now that you finished with radio? Where do you see podcasting going, and where are you going to take Auscast Network?
Yeah, well, Auscast has grown to just over 50 podcasts now.
Wow. I didn't know that.
There's a lot of content going around the place from just, a couple of dudes in an office here in the city in Adelaide. So it's grown to 50 podcasts. A lot of them, we did search for, and, we're hooked up with yourself and people like that. So it's been a very good journey because we've been surrounded by a lot of people that are passionate about the same thing. And that's been what I missed from the fresh days, where there was a lot of volunteers and they were there because they want to be, not because they were getting paid. When it comes to podcasting and Auscast and where we go from here, so we're growing rapidly. Every month we have 1, 2, or 3 brand new podcasts starting. We're a real content creation hub.
When you say content, what do you mean? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, the content comes from, it may come from us, where we make the podcast here in Adelaide in our studios here and our production booth, or it could be from someone like yourself who produces your own podcast, and we just distribute it. And sometimes it's just literally a sound file that was already being created by someone else, and we grab it and distribute it because that's what they want to do.
Talking about that and podcasting and your passion for it and how Auscast Network started, how do you see it changing and evolving with social media and digital marketing? Because you said something to me a few weeks ago about radio and broadcasting not going the way that everyone thinks it's going to go. Where do you see it all heading in your point of view? Can you say that? Yeah, why
not? I'm no longer employed by the Commercial Radio Network, so here we are. So, this has been a discussion in the office here many times. Podcasting and online content is where it's heading, of course. You know, we're using our phones more every day. Cars have the capability to play podcasts and online content. You no longer have to be force-fed entertainment or content from networks on radio. You can pick and choose what you want to listen to and what you want to watch, a bit like Netflix. What they did with TV, they changed the whole concept of viewing pleasure, really. So we see radio in general is becoming an old technology. It'll always have its sort of place in people's cars if they want to listen to something and they don't want to sort of pick and choose. They can just listen to some noise to fill a void. But where we see podcasting going is essentially what Netflix did to TV, and that's been an on-demand product. People can listen to it when they want, where they want, what they want. There's niches all over the place. Online content like podcasts taking over commercial radio.
And so with podcasting, because I listen to podcasts on my mobile phone all the time. So in between shows or whatever, I'm always listening to something new just to see what's out there and see what the content is. And also because it's a thing about being time poor. How would you advise a new podcaster or someone that wants to get into podcasting to use social media for podcasts? How has social media... Okay, let me reframe that question because that was a mouthful. I'm really sorry.
That's all right. So good.
How do you use social media for Auscast Network? Because you're talking about it being on mobile devices, what are your tips or things that you've done really, really well, and what are some of the things you've done terribly and you've learned from it?
Yeah, well, the terrible stuff is trying to spin too many plates at once. That's something that we've definitely learned from over the years, because with podcasting, there's no rules, essentially. You know, it's really what you go with your gut. So anything could happen. We did have a few issues where we weren't keeping up with it all. You know, we've got 50 podcasts. So if a podcast is putting out at least one episode a week, that's 50 times the social media just for one post for one episode. Like that's a lot of work for a couple of dudes in an office. So we've found that letting our podcasters know to work as a community, so that's sharing other people's podcasts, being involved socially via social media, or even being involved with the podcast. So, you know, CARIA, you might jump onto Jules's podcast for Hong Kong Confidential to talk internationally, you know. So it's all about sharing, caring, sort of working as a community. That's sort of the advice that we give people, especially new people. So because it's pretty daunting. If you've never done any media before, it's very daunting when you're starting off a brand new podcast. Like in about half an hour, we're recording a new podcast. They do work in the media, but they're not on air or anything like that. But they're so nervous.
Are they?
It'll be about, they're freaking out. But the great thing is, if they have the feeling of community around them, a bit like those passionate people that we used to be involved with at Fresh, with the volunteers at the station, it helps uplift the people to, feel a bit more comfortable when it comes to being in the media, especially online stuff.
Andy, what advice would you give your younger self about social media?
When I was younger, I had no idea about social media and how to use it properly. Yeah, if I was DJing somewhere, I'd pop up the promotional post and go, hey guys, come along to this. But it's all about being social on the media to make it really work for yourself. So
Good point.
We make sure that podcasters are, part of those podcasting groups that are on there, which they're all discussing about, where the best platform is, how to make money, what I do because of this audio piece, it doesn't sound right, all that sort of gear. So everyone can sort of help together and be a community. And, people really buy into that sort of feeling these days, especially when it comes to either listening to podcasts or being a podcaster.
You're correct, because it is about building a community, and that's what I tell my business clients when I do social media or strategy for them. It's about building that community and making people feel that they're involved. So you're spot on there. You're really spot on.
And that's the advice we sort of gave new podcasters when they thought that they were sounding a bit average. You're like, well, people like to be part of that journey of you starting off a bit raw and getting better with them. Like, you have them for life.
Well, I remember when I first started with you, the first couple, I recorded myself like 15 times for the one podcast. Because I was like, oh my God, can I do it? And
we have all been there, CARIA. We have all been there.
Terrible. Like on television, it's so easy for me, but podcasting, I go, oh my God, I still freak out. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, one thing that we find in commercial radio, being an announcer, is if you do it live and you have only one chance to do it, you'll nail it every time. But as soon as you start pre-recording things and your mind starts to play tricks on you, that's when it all starts to fall apart. And that's probably one downfall to podcasting, is a lot of the time it is to be pre-recorded and, exported out for a later date, unless it's a live podcast. So your mind does play those sort of tricks. But once you sort of get over the fact that, if I slip up, it's okay. It can either be edited out or it could be just part of the podcast and it, branches off into some talking point. So
you don't get that in live TV. You usually get the executive producer coming down and, switching you over the knuckles.
Yeah. Oh, that's rough.
I get that a lot.
Yeah. You've had to stop hand modelling all the gear now because of the knuckles. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Hey, I wanted to ask you about analytics, because a lot of people ask me, how important is data analytics for podcasting? How do you measure your return on investment for data analytics for Auscast Network?
Well, there's probably two talking points to that, because we've got Auscast Network, the podcast network, and then we've got a new thing we've just soft launched called Podvertise. So I'll go with the Auscast Network return on investment analytics. Yeah. Of course, analytics is really important for both of them. With Auscast Network, analytics is really important for, say, the podcaster, so they know if people are listening to their product and if it's really worth them investing all this time and effort into something that may not return that investment, if you know what I mean. With the analytics, because they are so in-depth, people can steer the direction of their podcast if they wish, if they'd like to follow that path, or they just, want to know that people are listening. So
can you give me an example of steering from analytics?
Yeah, it depends on your podcast as well, like your genre and where you're aiming it for. So if you're aiming an American football podcast and you're not getting much love in America, but you're getting a lot of love about it in India, well, then you can start to divert that the content a little bit towards the Indian sort of population and try to find out what they're really into and why they do love that podcast. Because the analytics can pick up so many different things from, obviously, the country that you're from, the age bracket of the person that is listening, the type of phone that they're listening on.
You can change keys. That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, 100%. So if you're taking it down one avenue and you're like, well, I'm not too sure if this is the right thing to do, but I want to get more listeners, and I reckon I can probably get a few from a particular area, well, then they can do
that's kind of what I did with mine. So I started with communications, and I realised it wasn't getting as many hits as I'd like. But the digital stuff and social media, I'm getting more interest either outside, and I'm getting people sending me stuff on social media asking me questions for my next podcast, which is great.
Yeah,
so that's
fantastic.
Rewarding. So this
and the thing is, it's not you either. It's got nothing to do with the way that you do things or anything like that. It's just the market. It's just what people are loving at the moment. Like if you introduced Netflix years ago, they probably wouldn't have taken that up. So,
I actually got asked to review Netflix years and years ago when it first started, And they asked me to review that and stan and do a YouTube channel about it. And I was like, no, silly me.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
Oops.
At least you got that story. Actually, did you want to go back to the second bit?
Yes.
With the Auscast Network, so obviously podcasters can see their analytics and all that sort of stuff, but also advertisers can too. So you can try to turn your podcast into a little bit of a money spinner. So if you've got some really good analytics, say a lot of listens, but they're males in the area of New Zealand, you can then use that information to then take it to an advertiser and go, here's who's actually listening to my podcast. Would you like to sponsor me? So you can actually tailor it towards the particular client. And that's something similar that we're kind of doing with Podvertise. But with Podvertise, we are using analytics and information that we get to sell ad space into the podcast. So with Podvertise, it's not to do with the network. This is podcasts in general, all across Australia. So all the major platforms from your Spotify's to your Podcast One to your Acast, we now sell for. So we use all the data that we collect and are able to show clients exactly who's listening, where they're listening from. But the great thing is we can find out your budget, how much you want to spend, and then tailor the campaign to whoever you're trying to point your brand towards. So say if you're, Automasters, for instance, and you want males and females between the age of 30 to 45 in a household with a high income, we can actually shoot that ad off to people that listen to podcasts and also music streaming services like Spotify. So,
wow, that's great. And do podcasters say for instance mine did really, really well, which fingers crossed it will.
It absolutely will.
So, and you monetize that. How would a podcaster like myself or a new podcaster, how would they benefit from being with Auscast Network?
Whenever a podcaster makes money, we make sure that we pay that on. So from ads to merchandise, that's our two big things for podcasters on the Auscast Network. So we organise all the merchandise for all the podcasts. The way we've got it set up is pretty much drop shipping. So we set up drop shipping for every one of our podcasts. So whenever there's a sale, it just happens automatically, and the podcaster then gets at the end of the month whatever the profit is on that particular product. So one thing we found is the way that I operate anyway is the community vibe, and if we can get you paid, we get paid as well. Like we're all successful together and we can all grow together rather than just being cold and just saying, nah, you're coming on with us, so we're just going to take all the profits for everything. So that's sort of like the way that we sort of operate. If we get paid, you get paid.
Now, can I ask you a few questions? Because we've had a few questions. I'm just looking in now. We've got a question from Instagram message from Peter in Marrickville, New South Wales.
Hello, Peter.
Can you ask Andy, what do I need to get onto a platform like yours? What's the best approach?
Just ask. That's always a good approach. If he's got a podcast already.
How do they ask? Do they email you, or how do they?
Yeah, for sure. So there's many ways to contact us. So you can contact Auscast Network through, even Facebook. We've got Twitter, we've got Instagram, or you can just email us through the website as well, auscastnetwork.com. And what we generally do is we'll receive, the request to come on board. We'll have a quick talk and check it out, get in contact with you, and then see where you want to sort of go with it. And if we think it's all good to go and you're happy with that, then we'll take you on board and see where it goes. One thing that we sort of have learnt over the years is there's a bit of a podcast disease called pod fade. And that's where someone gets super excited about a podcast. They may do 3 episodes, going all good, and then they just like, I haven't really got time for it. And I've not really seen much return, like you were saying before, on investment.
No, it takes a year of podcasting, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's a long game. It's absolutely, podcasting is a long game. And that's why we like to have passionate people around, because that helps us get through the dark times, if you know what I mean. So, so I would advise for him to get in contact with us. if he doesn't want to do that, that's fine as well. There's plenty of platforms out there. There's the Omni Studios, there's Whooshka, there's Acast, there's lots of different places to pop your podcast up. It's just that we sort of, I guess, we've learned over the years that not many people really know how to distribute their podcasts, so that's what we're here to do. But then we've also added on benefits like hopefully trying to get you paid, but also like guide you, and any sort of advice that we get given, we pass that on. And, we've got people going to podcast conferences overseas and then coming back with book loads full of notes. So
one thing that I have noticed about you and podcast is your distribution, the way that you do it's amazing, because I didn't think my podcast would be on other platforms for at least a year, and you got quite a few, and I was like shocked.
Well, that's also the power of being a network as well, is that we can ring up the CEO of a new app and go, hey, let's do some sort of partnership where you help us distribute what we've got in a network, and we'll forward on whatever you want to forward on from your particular app or product.
So I've got a tweet from Keep Life Simple with Fitness and Motivation.
Hey, I have a podcast, Keep Life Simple with Fitness and Motivation. How can I build my following on my podcast?
Yeah, so one easy thing that you can take from this today is one thing that we've found is make yourself a short promo, 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then just start contacting other podcasts, even podcasts that you like to listen to, the big ones that you think are really successful, and just ask them to see if they will swap a promo with you. You play a promo of theirs, and they'll play your promo for your podcast, and that's a marketing thing straight up. We've had heaps of success with that, and that's with podcasts not even on a network as well. So that's been a really good one. Just being super social on the social media and just continue to network. That's been another one.
Hey, CARIA, this is Parul here calling from Phoenix, Arizona, the United States. I am an author and publisher of the Growth Hacking book, and I have a question for Andy. Would Andy have any exercises to improve confidence while interviewing guests?
And adding on to her question, what about voice quality? Because I often struggle after a long day of talking on TV. When I come home to do a podcast, my voice isn't always the best. And as you can hear, I'm losing my voice slightly. Are there any exercises we can do to warm up the voice?
Oh, yeah. So one thing that I was taught at radio school was to get the best out of your voice when it comes to pronunciation. I may not have done these exercises before I started this interview, but is literally go through the vowels, so A, E, I, O, U, but really overextend your mouth when you're doing it. So go A, E, I, and then go up and back, and then flip it around. So I, A, U, O, stuff like that. Wow. And that gets your mouth ready for talking, basically. And it really, really does help with your confidence once you start talking, knowing the fact you're not going to mumble your words or stuff them up or anything like that.
Now, I've got another question from another growth hacker from India.
So many growth hackers.
Yeah, because that's part of my audience.
Love it.
Hello, CARIA. This is Dave from Growth Hacking, Odisha, India. Could Andy suggest a few tips on how to make a tech forum podcast interesting? This forum is basically dealing with music production and music gear.
Yeah, one thing that you'll definitely need to make sure before you get into the interesting stuff is make sure you've got all the permissions for your music, because you may not get caught for it now, but in the future there'll be bots going through podcasts and listening to podcasts, a bit like what they do with YouTube. If you put up a song that is with a record label, it will get taken down straight away.
Yeah.
So they'll need to make sure that all of their music has got the relevant permissions and purchases and licenses and all that sort of stuff. It's a very messy area, and we'll go into it another day, but just a heads up there with that one. Yeah. Making it interesting, probably with that particular podcast, your production's probably pretty key. Because you don't want to be messing around with music and talking over things and it's not working. We've had a few podcasts come through here before where just a basic bed music, which is the background music, is the same level as the voice, and it just completely kills the podcast. So probably the production from that point of view would be one major factor to make it interesting.
Could you suggest where people could purchase music that would make it interesting? Or
yeah, so there's a lot of free places out there. I think it's freesound.org is one that we've used before, and then you've just got to follow through with whatever the composer has asked you to do to use it. I think that's one thing on our list for this year in regards to working out what the future holds. I think that was something you're going to ask me at some point, would be to make an easy-to-go-to website for podcasters with music. I know a lot of composers. I've composed music myself. Not a lot of DJs that are willing to hand over their remixes and things like that. So I think that's something that we'll definitely have to... Yeah. Like, because we've got stuff, that's been made for radio to actual tunes and stuff like that. So I think that's definitely something up for this year to do. But in regards to making it interesting, probably a bit of personality would probably be good instead of just being a bland speak through. Hopefully, I'm assuming they've got something. So that'd be my probably tip for that one. Production and personality, the P&P.
I also wanted to... Here's a question from me. What's the weirdest interview you've ever done?
It was during the Adelaide Fringe a few years ago, and there was this guy that was a lizard. He's probably the weirdest one, and he was like... It was weird. He was like covered in like talcum powder. He looked like a monk, but then his tongue was like cut in half. So it was a pretty ordinary interview because you can't really talk that well when you've got a half a tongue.
Were you just laughing?
Yeah, I was more thinking like, what am I doing here? Yeah, like it make for great social media with the photos and stuff. So I can't argue with that. You just make every interview into the best one like that you possibly can. So if there's something weird going on, you'd sort of make it interesting and roll with it. Like done beer pong as an interview and things like that. But definitely Lizard Man will be one up there.
And one last question, and I'm going to let you go because I know you're a very busy man. You're now a father of one.
Yeah, I got two stepsons as well.
So what advice would you give your kids about using social media?
Well, something that I would also tell myself from what I've learned so far and also tell my kids is just remember there's a trail everywhere you go. So that trail may get you in the future. So whatever you say on social media, only say it if you're willing to say it to their face. Only say it if you're willing to put your future on it. But also just be yourself at the same time. Try not to be someone that you're not. Just be passionate, be a genuine person, and you'll be fine.
Well, thank you so much, Andy, for coming on the CARIA Cares podcast. I'm really looking forward to hearing this new podcast. Whatever it's...
Oh, yeah, me too.
And
soon find out what they're going to be like.
Have you got anything else that you'd like to add or say before we sign off?
If you want to get in contact us at auscastnetwork.com. Also, check out Podvertise as well. It's like if you've got a business or your events or something like that, it is perfect for that. A shop, we can show you if that person has listened to the ad and then goes into your shop afterwards. Like all that analytics is available to us. So, yeah, podvertise.com.au. I'd love to talk to you. But podcasting is the way to go, CARIA.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm back. I'm
yeah.
back and I'm ready for it.
You're doing a fantastic job. We love what you do. And I haven't asked too many people here in Adelaide about it, but I've had people come up to me and say, I love listening to the CARIA Cares, and they take your hints and tips and use it.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Now, I hope you found value out of that interview with Andy. Now that you know exactly how to start a podcast with Auscast Network and build brand awareness, and if you want to join a community of digital nomads just like us, where I share up-to-date social media strategies to help you navigate this space, join my social media playbook course. You can find the link on my website, kariwatt.com, or in the comments below. You might be able to hear my dog snoring in the background. I can't seem to wake him up. It's raining outside, so the fires in New South Wales are finally out. So we're quite happy, all the bushfires. And reach out with any questions you might have, or let me know any topics you'd like me to cover. Remember to hit the like button and share this with a friend who could use a helping hand. Why? Because CARIA cares about women helping women and men who could use that helping hand. See you in the next podcast. Peace.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award winning Auscast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Auscast.
Simply head to auscastnetwork.com for details.